Welcome to Political Trade Secrets, an inside look at campaigns and politics, where we pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and investigate all aspects of politics and how elections are won. Now, here's your host, Dustin Olson.
Welcome to Political Trade Secrets. I'm Dustin Olson. It's great to have everybody here. We are going to have a great show today. We've got Pastor J.C. Church, who's going to be joining us to talk about getting out the vote with the Christian community and helping pastors to lead their congregations to be part of the public square. And I'm joined by my co-host, Sean Bartley. Sean, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Good morning. Good Friday, everybody.
Yeah, and we'll also be talking about the debate. We're going to come back after our interview with Pastor Church, so I have a couple of thoughts about that, and we'll go into what we thought happened in the debate. So if you're interested in that, I think that'll be interesting as well. So with that, if you are listening on one of the 11 platforms across the internet that we're live streaming right now, please do leave comments or questions. Those all get fed back here. If you're on YouTube or if you're on Periscope or you're on one of the Facebook pages, please do post your comments. And if you're listening on one of the podcasting platforms, we appreciate your reviews and your ratings. And if you follow us or subscribe, that always makes a difference. But we really appreciate people coming and joining us for this conversation. I think this one's going to be extremely special. And if you're a person of faith, regardless of what your faith is, I think you're going to really appreciate what Pastor Church has to say about how you can help people be salt and light in the world, and just be a part of something special. And also, I thought was interesting is he has a unique perspective from across the country, going to all these different swing states. And kind of giving a sense of what's going on the ground. So I think people will enjoy that. What do you think people will appreciate, Sean, out of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a different perspective. It was something that was kind of talked about after the election 4 years ago, getting how people of faith made the difference for President Trump 4 years ago. And just what's being done to make sure that a group that stayed on the sidelines for many decades, to be perfectly honest, what's being done to have them get in the public square. So
yeah,
I think it's going to just be a great conversation today, and so looking forward to that and getting to share it with our listeners.
Yeah, so I'd like to just really quick remind people about our sponsors. So we've got Grassfire. Here we are in the last week and a half of the election, and you want to be talking directly with your people, your voters. So canvassing and live calling are really important right now to have that person-to-person contact. And then also petitioning as we're going into the new year, into the off-year election cycle. There'll be a lot of issues that are on the ballot, and in particular, having a really credible organization be able to be out in front of the supermarket, go door to door, and to get the signatures for the petitions, somebody who has integrity and will do it legally. There's a lot of people who break the law around the country on these issues. And what happens is people don't end up on the ballot, which is a travesty. And another great way to get in front of people here in the closing days of the election is tincenttexting.com. Go there. You can have a campaign launch today. People love to interact over text, and it's really amazing. I think there's one campaign that you're working with tincenttexting.com, and they raised $20,000 off of their texting campaign, which is remarkable for a congressional race, I think it was.
Yeah, I think, look, people are reaching out to their voters and their supporters just to remind them one last time that they need them. And so what a great way to reach out to folks right where they are. And it's something that we all have with us, even me right here, right now. So, it's a great way to just one or two more times before the election. So.
Yeah, and don't forget to download the 8 pro tips for political texting, whether you're doing the volunteer texting or you're doing a full service mass texting like instant texting. You can get the book there at the website, and I think you'll find a lot of good advice in there. And through the show, so we're going to do the interview. If you have any questions you'd like to talk about how Christians can be involved, how pastors can be involved, there's going to be some resources in the interview itself. But if you have questions about that, please let us know. Leave them in the comments. And while the interview is going on, you can go ahead and put your comments in as to what you thought happened in the debate, and we can take that into consideration when we do our recap when we come back. And I think that'll be a lot of fun. You can also tweet at us if you want to get Sean. It's at Sean SEAN _Bartley. Bartley. And then if you want to go to my Twitter, it's at Dustin Olson. And I would be interested if you want to go there. I have a poll up right now that is asking who won the debate, and you can go and check that out. I will pin it to the top of the page so it's easy to see. And just let us know who you think won the debate. And we've had already, since I posted it, we've had quite a few people already voting in that. So we'd love to see what your thoughts are there. So check that out at Dustin Olson. It'll be twitter.com/Dustin Olson. But with that, we're going to move on with the show, and we're going to have Pastor J.C. Church, and you're going to love this. So thank you very much, and on with the show. Welcome back. We are excited to have the founder and lead pastor of Victory and Truth Ministries and the guy who oversees the ground game for the Family Research Council, Pastor J.C. Church, joining us. Pastor Church, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great, guys. It's an honor to be with you. And just let me quickly say thank you for being a voice and all the work that you guys are doing for our country.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. Sean has met you a few times on campaigns, and this is our first time to meet each other. But he's really shared with me the passion that you have with empowering Christians to be salt and light in the public square, and we really appreciate that. And I'm curious, how did you first see the need for Christians to be more engaged in public life?
Well, that's a great question. Let me say, when we founded our church 23 years ago, I thought that every pastor knew that the church was the consciousness of the nation. I was shocked, stunned, and amazed at how many people were standing down and avoiding the issues of the day and not speaking up. You referenced being salt and light. The Bible says we are the salt and light to the world. Not we're going to be, we currently are. And it bothered me when I saw that the moral issues had been hijacked politically to the point that we had faith leaders thinking they were political when in fact they were moral. This isn't a question of being too political. This is a question of being too biblical. And when I began to look at the state of Ohio, knowing that no true Republican conservative has won the White House, the most powerful position in the world since 1860, unless they came through Ohio, we just knew as a church, and I thought as leader, it was my biblical responsibility to educate, inform, and motivate our people to vote their values and be engaged. And so it's always been a part of our ministry's DNA to make sure our people understood they have a responsibility to participate.
Yeah, and the work that's been done here in Ohio has been really remarkable. One of the issues I want to ask you about, specifically Ohio-based, and I think you've been taking this elsewhere, is the work that you and others did on the heartbeat bill. And where did you see the intersection of that and politics and really all the work that you had been doing, and how did that all play out?
Well, for me, this is, again, a moral and a biblical issue. I don't know how you can read 3 pages of your Bible and not come to the place that all life is precious from natural conception to natural death. And that our position as God-fearing individuals is we must be pro-life. And so we got deeply involved years ago, taking a stand for life. Thou shalt not kill. Life is precious. Life is a gift from God. to me, it was just an obvious thing. And so we got deeply involved and began to make sure there were legislators running across the state. Got a supermajority in the House and the Senate several years ago. Got the heartbeat bill passed in 2016 and 2018, and our then governor vetoed it. And we just kept staying in the fight, making sure we had legislators in place. And then, of course, when our now governor, Mike DeWine, was running, we had conversations and meetings, discussed this. Of course, he was for the heartbeat bill. As the attorney general, I called him when it was vetoed. I said, would you support this and fight for this? He goes, I will. And I said, if I become governor, I'll sign it. And within about 3 months or so after he became our governor, we were able to get the heartbeat bill passed in Ohio. But I would encourage your listeners to know that these issues sometimes are long-term fights, and we've got to get engaged and stay engaged and be moved by our convictions. And so, to me, it's barbaric that we would even have individuals believe it's okay for a baby to go to the end of the 9th month, and then we can abort that baby, or God forbid that in a botched abortion, the baby be alive and we let it lay there and die. Mm-hmm. It's unconscionable. But the scripture does say when they love not the truth, they're given over to delusional minds. And we are living in a deluded and polluted moment in time. And for me, the life issue is the big issue, that if we can't stand for life, we get everything else wrong.
Yeah. It seems like, well, my hope is that 100 years from now, people will look back and they will be just shocked by the barbarism of that act and that we allowed that. But I would imagine in the time that you've been engaged, have you seen the public move on that issue?
I think that now compared to the 70s with 3D imaging and all the imaging that we have now, hearing the heartbeats, things of that nature, I think there's been an awakening. I think that the barbaric nature of the reality of exactly what happens in the procedure, the harvesting and the selling of these baby parts has really woke a lot of people up. Now, there are some who are far over on the left and in dark, and I think it's demonically inspired and could care less as they're full of their anger and their hatred. But you make an excellent point. For all of us and all listening today, when your life is said, sung, and done, and your life is over, or your ministry, your business is over, everyone will know us for one of three things. And they will, our children are watching, and they will look back at this moment in time and know what we did or did not do, whether we stood courageously or whether we stood down as cowards. And we all will be marked by one of three things: the problems we created, the problems we allowed, or the problems we solved. And there can be no greater issue that we as God-fearing individuals, faith leaders, faith influencers, and pastors stand for than the issue of life.
Well, I appreciate you taking a stand on it. One of the most, I would say, inspirational people in my life as a political leader is my mother-in-law, who used to be the president of South Carolinians for Life. And she did sidewalk counseling. I think she used to take my wife when she was just a kid in the stroller, and they would be out there. And, just the legacy that her leadership has for her family is pretty cool to see. But it also took, and still does, it takes a lot of courage for someone to put themselves out there, because it's not just a political battle. It seems a spiritual battle as well.
Well, there's no question we're fighting spirits and principalities, but this is really at its core a moral issue. This is a decency issue. Mm-hmm. This is a right and wrong issue. Yeah. This is a common sense issue. When you go to Florida and you walk the beaches and you see the little turtle places where they got the fence around the turtle and the eggs are protected, you see the little sign that says, if you touch this egg or harm this egg or this nest, it's like a several $1,000 fine and potentially 6 months or a year in prison. Why? Because they recognize life in that egg. The abnormals become normal. The normals become abnormal. Truth is a lie. Lies are truth. We can't even recognize that that's a life in someone's womb. So to me, it's almost common sense. And we stood and we will continue to stand for this issue.
Well, thank you for that clarity. And I'm curious. So, with your work with the Family Research Council, you've been traveling all over the country, and it seems like a breakneck pace. I really appreciate the work that you're doing to get Christians to be active and working with pastors. But I'm just curious, being all over, what have you been seeing? What is it like? What states have you been in the most? That's with a week and a half to go to the election. It has to be fascinating.
Well, I tell you what I'm seeing is an awakening, a momentum unlike before. Actually being on the ground, seeing the excitement, seeing the energy, and seeing the momentum for this president, and in particular for the positions of this party. So I've been in Minnesota and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, Michigan, Florida. The Rust Belt, those critical states that will play a big factor in the conclusion of this election. But I would say, due to the left, what I'm seeing so overplaying the socialism card, there really has been an awakening. This COVID crisis and seeing the governmental overreach to lock down, punish, and threaten churches in states like California and other states, there is an opportunity for pastors to really wake up. And I see some of them are, and I also see some that are folding. There's no doubt that there is a defining moment going on before our very eyes that may be alarming to us, but it is a biblical pattern. There is a difference between being a hireling and a prophetic voice today. And some are standing down because they really are hirelings. I think that this is a critical moment in time, that there is a Gideon's army moment, there is a Muhlenberg moment, there's a band of Bonhoeffers that are rising up, that are awake and realize the threats to our religious freedoms are absolutely undeniably real, and they're rising up. And I pray that we'll see the result of that by encouraging these pastors to not only teach their people the stewardship of their money, their health, their time, their life, but their influence and their vote. We have a responsibility. Guys, 1.3 million young individuals. The youngest that I'm aware of was the age 15 that died in the Vietnam War. Several boys were 16, 17, and countless 18. Wanted to defend our country, joined our military, spilled their blood in the Vietnam War. 1.3 million people have laid their life down and died in wars and battles to give us this freedom called America. If they can lay their life down, we can stand in line for a couple minutes and cast a vote to maintain that freedom. So I will tell you, there's an awakening, and it's exciting to see on the ground.
Yeah.
And absolutely, and I think that impassioned plea for people to vote. There's one thing that you and I have discussed is that there seems to be a fear of in some pastors of really giving guidance to their parishioners, and be it from the government, whether it's on the tax side, but now you just mentioned on the COVID and some of the other restrictions. What is your message to some pastors that might be on the fence about what their role is in this at this time, or in the public sphere?
Well, I'd say, as a pastor, this is your responsibility. We're to be watchmen on the wall. We're to be gatekeepers. If Esther would have made the decision to stay neutral and just stay, if you will, inside her building while she's praying and fasting, every Jew would have died. Every single one of them. She had to take the culture of life and engage the culture of death. If Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had capitulated like everybody else, the heathen king Nebuchadnezzar got a revelation of God when they stood in the face of the fire, and that fire represents our country burning with godlessness, perversion, and madness. Just if we stand, vote, and engage, we just might see heathen kings get a revelation of God that they didn't have before. God help us if everybody had their heart turned and we began to return to the values and virtues that made us great and always gives us victory. So I would say to those pastors, you have a responsibility to teach your people to respect and honor the freedoms, this experiment called America. And it's not about being political. It's not about being political. It's about being biblical. It's about stewardship, and it's our responsibility to do so.
Yeah. So thinking about the pastor, so a pastor decides that they are going to take on being that leader. What can they do? Like, what are specific actions that they can do to demonstrate that leadership?
Well, you can preach and teach messages about civic engagement, stewardship, messages about Esther, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The Bible is full of our responsibility of engaging and being the salt and light of the world. At this hour, they can certainly go to prayvotestand.org, prayvotestand.org, and there they could quickly get a download of the party platform comparisons that we have. Our voter guides are there. And a unique piece there, guys, if you haven't seen it, you need to go there, the Trump accomplishments piece. Now, that goes back to 2017, 18, 19, and 20. It's stuff the media is not going to put out, and it lists all of his accomplishments. I'll tell you the background on that. We were at the White House in 2017 for a briefing, and they began unpacking some of the things that had been done so far. No one knew that. So we came up with the idea of creating a running document of the actual accomplishments. So we now have a 4-year performance that we can judge and look at that we couldn't before. So I would encourage those pastors, do your due diligence, do your homework, and know, as a minimum, you are safe to hand out voter guides. And I always tell people, vote your values, be proud of those values, whatever they may be, stand beside those values, but know your silence is an endorsement, your avoidance is an acceptance, your vote is your voice, and our job is to equip you and inform you, and then you make your educated decision. So we are providing numerous resources for pastors to do that. And if all pastors do that, I believe our outcome will be good.
And that's prayvotestand.org.
Yeah, prayvotestand.org. And they can click and read all of those critical pieces and educate themselves. And they can download those and share those over the next couple of weeks or 12 days with their congregants and their circles of influence.
So one of the honors of our lives for both myself and Sean, I think I can speak for him, is we were able to be part of the team that worked on production for the public events and ceremonies for the president's inauguration in 2017. And as part of that, we were involved in different things. Sean did the parade more so. I did the concerts on the mall. But our whole team was part of the National Prayer Service at the National Cathedral, and then also the private prayer service. And it was just amazing to see how many people of faith had come together and were a part of this movement. And I know at the National Prayer Service, there were several moments there. It was really obvious that our new president was truly moved by the prayers that were being said, and just there's almost like a sense of peace that was present in the atmosphere in that moment. And I'm just curious as to your view of. Donald Trump has a full life that has so many different things that happened in it, and to see that he's the one who has had these results accomplished for a lot of people is pretty amazing. I'm just curious your perspective on that, and because some Christians will tell me, they're like, "How could you vote for Donald J. Trump?"
Well, what I say to folks on that issue is this: our personality and our past is not on trial here.
Yeah.
We're not voting for a savior. We had one perfect candidate and crucified him 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So there isn't anybody who's listening to us that doesn't have a skeleton in their closet, that doesn't have a past. My past does not disqualify me for my future. If we want to make the case, how could I as a Christian vote for someone like that? Let's bring it back real quick for a moment to the life issue.
Yeah.
This is the most pro-life, pro-Israel, pro-religious liberty, pro-First Amendment, pro-Second Amendment leader we've ever had. His tweets are his tweets, his personality is his personality. But here's what people have to understand. This man's going to do what he says he's going to do. So we've got to get past the past, put the personality on the shelf, look at the performance, look at the position, look at the policies, look at the party platform and what they're going to be standing for and what type of judicial appointments they will make and what type of impact they can have for the issues that are near and dear to us. Many would like to get us so spoiled over his personality that we don't vote.
Yeah.
No vote is a vote. Okay? And our system gives us two choices. Both of them, every 4 years, are flawed. There's no one perfect. So I've got to look at what aligns itself with my biblical values and my concerns in the greatest degree, in the greatest way. Anytime any president, including this one, goes in a direction or in a position that violates the word of God or does something wrong, we're not going to cheer that on. We're not going to stand with that. We're going to voice that. But we're also going to stand and fight for the issues we care about, like our religious liberties and our freedoms.
Yeah.
And that is a critical piece. So we've got to, I think, get a bigger picture of that and know that there are those on the left that want to make this about a personality argument, not a policy argument.
Because if that was the case, then there's a lot of people who wouldn't have voted for King David if he were on the ballot.
Absolutely. And many of us, if we go back, I call it back to the young and dumb days or the PT days. One guy said, "You went to Bowling Green?" I'm like, "No, that means before God." We all, when we were 18, 19, 20, 25, maybe said something, did something that we would do a lot different when we were immature. And if we're going to go back decades ago, most people would probably be disqualified if the standard is perfection.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at this election and what's going on here, really in the next couple of weeks here, what is happening in this cycle to ensure that as many evangelicals as possible are voting?
I think that most of your talk shows, radio shows, allied organizations, groups like FRC, many other of our allied groups, we've got boots on the ground. We've got door knocking going on. We've got phone campaigns going on. We've got a plethora of literature being mailed out and communicating. We've got text banking going on, phone banks going on, just really trying to make sure we can do everything humanly possible to make sure people understand what's at stake. Guys, listen, I truly believe the Republic is hanging in the balance. We have never been in a place like this before, and we've often heard, well, this is the most important election of your lifetime. Well, let me give you some news. Each election here forward will be the most important election of your lifetime. And unfortunately, we're divided, and to the winner goes the spoil of power and influence, and a chance, should the left gain power, to stack the court, to maybe do away with some of our founding documents, to begin to move towards socialism in a way that's extremely dangerous. So this really is a vote between life and death, in darkness and light, capitalism and socialism. I mean, our freedoms are hanging in the balance. So I tell guys, think of it this way. If you could have a 74-year-old billionaire president who's lost billions of dollars, who works for free, who has taken more personal attacks than anyone I've ever known daily for 5 years, who sleeps 4 or 5 hours a night, I think what we can do is work 18 hours a day to talk to everybody we can, influence everybody we can in these last few days.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you mentioned PrayVoteStand.org before. Where else can folks get involved and join the fight?
Well, pastors can go to frc.org and find a myriad of information and resources there for them. But strategically, in this particular moment in time, it's all about get out to vote. It's all about voter guides. It's all about taking these last few moments, stewarding your influence over your congregants and in your community to make sure everyone is voting and participating. So I'm encouraging everybody, whether they're pastors or some, just individuals, whether you own a little company or no matter where you work, talk to everybody make a pledge to vote and make a pledge to make sure everyone is voting.
Yeah. So you mentioned the court packing issue, and it's kind of, that almost is like I don't know, we might even call it a meta issue. It's like such a huge thing, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who don't realize what that could mean. but you pack the court, you add justices to the Supreme Court, then all of a sudden you can start, in a way, rewriting, as they call it, the living Constitution. Mm-hmm. And what do you think? What are the things that Christians are going to, in particular, be affected by immediately? You've talked about religious liberty. You've talked about the right to life. Where do you think that could be a real danger for we as people of faith?
I think the number one and the biggest thing is, unless your head is stuck in the sand, it's undeniable that the hatred and hostility for everything that is God and goodly is taking place before our very eyes. Mm-hmm. If those who are operating in that realm gain power, your religious liberties and freedoms are more at risk than ever before. Let's just look at what's happened with some of these governors in some of these Democratic-controlled states as it relates to the church. Mm-hmm. I mean, they don't want churches meeting, but other establishments can be open. And so I would say, look, if you cherish your religious freedom in a special way, you better wake up right now and realize if what you just said takes place, the biggest threat I think that we have would be the intrusion and the impact it would have on our religious liberties and our freedoms.
Yeah. It is scary to watch mm-hmm. churches across this country being shut down and for people not being able to freely associate in the same location. I think you point out we've already gotten a sneak preview of what could happen.
Yeah. Well, I think a defining time. I think of Gideon's army very quickly. He has 32,000 people and they're good for dress rehearsal. And then when he tells them this is not dress rehearsal, his mega church goes from 32,000 to 10,000. Okay, so the first group to go home were the cowards. The second group to go home were the careless. 9,700 were careless. Careless people will get you killed in battle. Mm. Well, was 300 who were courageous. Outnumbered 125,000 to 300, God downloaded a strategy for a significant victory. I believe what we're experiencing is a divine revealing from the true and the false, a divine reduction, which no one likes, then the divine revelation that I believe God is not through with America yet. America, 4.5% of the world's population, we control over 40% of the world's wealth. Less than 1% of all humans ever born from Genesis 1:1 have experienced the freedom that we have and the prosperity we have in this nation. 85% of all mission money and mission efforts finds its origins from the soil of the United States of America. We have rebuilt more infrastructures after wars than any country. We've given more humanitarian aid to world disasters than any country. We have freed more people from tyranny than any other country. We are hated. The enemy hates us, and there are those who hate us, that if America goes down, it affects the world in an incredibly dangerous way. So there's a lot at stake at this moment in time, and I believe that God is going to bring a strategy, and I want our listeners to be very encouraged that God still sits high, looks low, God's in control, but remember this, our part God will not do, his part we cannot do. Having done our part, let's stand and see what God does with this great experiment called America.
Well, I love it. That's a amazing message. Thank you for that. And people can go to prayvotestand.org. Any last thoughts that you'd like to give people?
Well, I would say join us and thousands across the country in serious prayer. I know we can say we pray and we'll pray, but we're talking about actually having a conversation of the creator of the universe. Set aside serious time to pray, number one, and number two, participate. Make sure you're participating and well-informed from the top down on your ballot, where you live, and make sure you vote right.
Well, Pastor Church, as we close, would you mind closing us in prayer?
Oh, I would be honored to, guys. Thank you so very much. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for the opportunity to be with our friends today. I pray that you would amplify their voice and their influence and rain down favor from above on what they're doing to stand in this moment in time. We bow before you and we humble ourselves and all who are listening today that you would help us to do our best. I pray for our president, our national leaders, our state leaders, our pastors, those who stand for righteousness. We are the light and salt in this world. And so, God, I pray that you help us to pillow our head each night knowing we did all we could with where we were that day. We bow before you in acknowledgement, and we thank you for America. Help us, God, to share the gospel to those who are lost, that they would come to know Christ and know the truth that transforms lives. And so we pray today, God, that in these coming days that you will let truth prevail and that your continued blessing on this nation would rain down supreme. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well, thank you very much, Pastor Church. We really appreciate it. And Godspeed.
Godspeed. Keep up the good work, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, you just saw our great recent interview with Pastor J.C. Church, and what I really enjoyed about it was being able to get the perspective of what's going on the ground out there in key battleground states, not just here in the great state of Ohio, but also in Florida and the upper Midwest and all the places that are getting talked about all over your cable news right now. Just the work that's being done through Family Research Council and the effort to get clergy involved is really great. And knowing that that's going on, I know will be a comfort to some of the folks listening, and maybe not a comfort to some of the others listening. But it was really great, and really enjoyed the information we got today.
Yeah, it was a great interview, and I just love the work that he's doing, and pray that it continues to be blessed. Thank you for everybody who was participating, and we got a few questions during that segment, and we'll just go through those real quickly. Justin asks, "Do you support life for all people, even those who work at abortion clinics?" Well, I can speak for myself, and I have a feeling that this would be the case for everybody who's part of that interview. Is that yes, we support life for all people.
Yep, absolutely.
That's pretty easy. The pro-life movement's pretty clear about that. They're for life for everybody, and for I would also say compassion. Yeah, for all people.
And it's really about protecting innocent life and protecting. But great question there, because I get that there's a lot that goes on in these things, and it's always hard to tell, especially with some of the rhetoric that gets on out there. So really appreciate that, and I really appreciate the dialogue throughout, and really getting feedback on all that was going on during the conversation there. One thing Justin mentioned is that he's still undecided in this race, and I get how some people could be. I think so often people say, "I don't know how somebody could be undecided." Well, I think it really depends on some of the things that we talked about when we were talking about spotting fake news and really getting the filters that people have in the news that they're getting. Is one way that can happen. It can also be, the issues that are of importance in that moment for a voter, and when they appear to be contradictory. And so it's really like, hey, what are the things that whatever the race is can have an impact on the issues that matter most to you. I know at least for me, it's about who is going to allow or give me the ability to live my life, and be able to make more of those choices for myself and my family and whatnot. So I think that at least for me, and one of the things that I saw was mentioned in there was the relief package and helping small businesses. I know that that's something that President Trump worked on right from the beginning of this thing, really seeing when businesses were going to be hindered or shut down due to no fault of their own, that some sort of assistance needed to happen. And I think that
there's been 3 of those.
Yes, and I think
amazing.
I think it's been the biggest source of contention in this package is that it seems to be that's what the president and Republicans are fighting for, while on the other side, it appears to be an effort to have things like aid to states and municipalities, some that were in trouble long before a virus came along and had that be a decision there. So I know that's going to be, I know that's one of the issues, and something that I thought would have been discussed a little more last night. So
we're going to go into the debate recap, but you're specifically talking about some of the feedback that we've been getting from some folks, from Justin in particular, and going into this is what he says about the debate. I will say, despite his anger at it, Trump did way better last night than the first night. More policy. That's what independents want. It definitely was a different experience last night. So I think what we want to do is go back and kind of grade ourselves. And we have the filters that we've been using. I have a new filter, though, I'd like to add to it. So we have the expectations filter, the media filter, the history filter, and then what I think is the most important one after the debate is the experience filter, to look at it. So what this is just places to look from to get different perspectives. And then one I would like to add is the base engagement filter. I think that in this election is probably one of the most important places to look from. So from the expectations filter, I'll just go first on that. I would say that Biden lost on that. The expectations were probably higher for him than he was able to perform at. Just looking at it really clearly, I think that's where it was. The expectations for President Trump were extremely high and at the same time extremely low. So people said, oh, he has to do so much in this debate. But at the same time, they're like, can he do it? And I think he totally won on that front. One that we didn't know, we had a question. We posed a question before the debate. The Trump campaign and the president were definitely working to try to have the debate commission and the media be more fair, in particular the moderator be more fair. And we talked about this before. It's something that he's done in the past where you call into question the fairness in advance, or you start dealing with that so that they will correct and they will actually do it. And I would say that that happened. And I would say that the debate commission and the moderator exceeded expectations. That's my opinion of it. But when you look at the expectations filter, Sean, what would you say happened? And anything else you'd like to say about how you would grade?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the last first, which was the moderator. Kristen Welker, she was blessed with all of us looking through what I'd call the Wallace filter. And,
like, how horrible can you be?
Yeah, and so she definitely got graded on a curve. I thought she did well, you know. And if anybody is follows me on Facebook, there were a few points where I pointed out kind of where there was still the bias.
It's gotten to the point in this country that if you are even slightly right of center or even center and right of center, you just settle for extreme liberal bias, and that's better than the kind of thumb on the scale like Chris Wallace did.
Yeah,
and interrupting and the combativeness towards the right.
Yeah, and like I said, I thought she did a fine job, and if we were grading her against moderators of 20 years ago, I don't know that we'd necessarily have the same opinion. But I thought she did a fine job, and from
the expectations filter perspective, the expectations were pretty low for the moderator in this debate. And one thing that I will say, this is so President Trump's communications abilities. This was a really good example of it. His ability to modulate and do different strategies and approaches for different situations. It is actually one of the most fascinating things that you can see him do. And he was a different persona last night than he was in the first debate. But one place that he did it is he had the presence of mind. It's so hard when you have the hot white lights of the stage on you to think on your feet. And he's able to do that really well. So some people might be like, oh, he should say this or he should say that. Well, if you've ever been in a debate yourself, or if you've ever been in a media interview yourself, you know that the amped up nature of your body is just not going to let you think as clearly. You kind of get tunnel vision through that process. But he took a moment in the middle of the debate, to acknowledge her for her performance. And I will say that the one that was clearly genuine, but also he had presence of mind to think of it, which was interesting in and of itself. And then he I think also from a strategic perspective, being able to do that was pretty powerful. And it was also what everybody was thinking. And so by speaking what everybody was thinking, that connects him with his audience. Anything else on the expectations filter?
I don't have much to add from what you had there. So
well, going to the media filter, yeah. I know you're a Babylon Bee fan. I loved, so I shared this on various social media yesterday, but the article, CNN pre-debate coverage declares Trump winner.
Or Biden winner.
Declares Biden winner of debate, and they do like pre-debate poll, declares Biden winner of debate. And anyway, it's just funny that that's exactly how it was. And then you watched afterwards. So I mean, this one is so obvious. The media filter is the easiest to predict of everything. It is so predictive, and I would say it's probably because it's robots who control it. The algorithms and the analytics are pretty consistent. So the Babylon Bee basically got it right. After the debate, CNN, they don't explain where they got their poll, but they had a poll that said Biden wins. And then Fox, it's overwhelmingly that Trump wins. And the coverage was that way. I didn't get to watch too much of the coverage. I didn't get to watch MSNBC at all. But the CNN, they looked actually pained afterwards. Well, like they were like someone kicked their dog.
I think the tough part was how it finished. Joe Biden clearly ran out of steam at the end. I mean, I just don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah.
And
you could tell the sun was going down.
Yeah, and it was it was having a real detriment to, like, I mean, he was saying things that, he actually let the truth out a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm going to, oil, forget about it,
That, by the way, that is the one thing I will give CNN credit, because it's such an obvious, I mean, it's such a gift. So a lot of people probably, depending on where you live, you may not have thought that was a big deal. And you see all these pundits and everybody else saying it's a big deal. It's a big deal in Pennsylvania. It's a big deal in Nevada. It's a big deal in New Mexico. It's a big deal in Arizona. It's a big deal in Colorado. There's a lot of places where being against fracking is a pretty big deal. And it's a big deal with independents in particular, unaffiliated voters. The far left, of course, it's what they want. But him saying that was a pretty big deal. But when he said, show the tape, like that movement and saying it right to camera was just ready-made for a TV ad.
Yeah.
Because you can go right to the tape of him saying, no fracking, I will get rid of it totally. And like, you guys clearly pandering to people. But he's done it so many times, and there's so much tape that CNN even had to, that young lady that they have that does their fact checking.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what his name is. Anyway, he made sure to fact check it.
Yeah.
Now he was able to try to color it as best as he could, but it was interesting to see that.
Well, it was interesting, and that happened at 10:32, and clearly, I think we found out why hour-and-a-half debates are the limit for old Joe. Because I really thought that was a differentiator there, and it has an impact in so many places. Places you don't even think about. Eastern Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
the Texas, and not just in the presidential race. Now, the question of, okay, are you with Biden? in these Pennsylvania swing House districts? Are you with Biden?
I think of John Hickenlooper, who famously drank fracking fluid. Mm-hmm. Is he now going to? I think at this point he probably has lost most of the industry people that he used to have on board. But I want to point out Robert Turner. Thank you for the post. Trump got my vote in Utah. Thank you for letting us know that. And I want to let people know what so we're talking about the media polls and what they came out. So we've had apparently 135 votes on the, I'm going to refresh on this. And we've had 135 votes, and it was on our poll, it's 84.4% for Trump won the debate, and Biden is 15.6%. And I actually intentionally put Biden first, actually, so that, give him a little bit of a shot.
Yeah.
But that's what we got on Twitter.
And I think but really the media filter, I think they, kind of a typical thing that you would get here, I think, given if expectations were met. The one thing that I seem to hear were, well, this isn't really going to move people much. There aren't too many people undecided. I mean, and we've been talking with Justin here. That's kind of how they try to frame this. Like, well, everybody's made up their mind, and so this really doesn't matter. And so, well, then, okay, why have it? Would be, I think it begs the obvious question, and I think it's because it does matter. I think people want to know the differences between candidates, not just in style.
And that was a big one, and it's not the only one. There was clearly, I think, people were left with an idea that that Trump. So here's the thing: I think people, when they hear Biden say that Trump doesn't have a plan, and then Biden says everything that we've all watched happen in our country for 6 months or more, I think there's something like there's a disconnect. I would think for most people out there, be like, wait a second, I've been being told to wear a mask for 6 months. What is different about him saying that now? That he's really, really more about it? And then you get the sense that he leaves you with the sense that, and we'll talk about this, the experience filter, but he leaves you with the sense that he would shut down the economy again, and the president's looking towards building the economy. And if you know that people are having a hard time, you know that reopening the economy is a pretty important thing. And anyway, so moving on from the media filter, I think that we're pretty accurate. That doesn't really count for much, though, honestly. So the history filter is that the incumbent president will do better in the second debate. Well, that happened, and we said that, and that's not too surprising. Anything else you want to say about that? There's also the debate that's the last debate. So this is one thing that's weird about this. They were actually trying to have more than, well, the Trump campaign was trying to have more than 3 debates. We ended up with 2 debates, and I think, ultimately we can see that Biden probably wouldn't have done well with more debates. And he took 4 days off. I will say this isn't good, and it's not great, and it's not, I'm not saying that it's the right thing, but I will give the Biden campaign, if I was to be the Biden campaign manager, I probably would have made the same decision considering all the inputs, taking him off of the campaign. Everybody says you can't do that, and conservative media say that's terrible, and I think they should say that because I do think it's actually terrible. However, it was the right choice for them to do that. The guy needed rest. He needed to be super prepared, and taking him off the campaign for 4 days was the right choice to do that. And I think they are betting that it doesn't matter, because of the pandemic and doing live events isn't so easy, and their base doesn't want to do live events really anyway, that it was the right choice. And I think ultimately they probably made the best decision. And not having as many debates is probably a good thing for Joe Biden, because clearly if they had to take him off the campaign trail for 4 or more days each time, that would be pretty difficult. So we've got a question from Robert, and he says, question, Biden question Biden saying stop oil. Do you think Republicans and Trump make up ground in Pennsylvania now? And I definitely do. I think, honestly, Robert, you mentioned that you're in Utah. I think that he's going to pick up where you live in Utah is very, I would say, pro-Trump. But as you know, there's a certain streak in that state, and I would think that that's changing a little bit. So we also got a question or a comment from Kathy watching, voting for freedom and upholding our constitutional rights. Well, thank you for that. I do think that was one of the contrasts that you came away from the whole night, is that the freedom candidate was Trump and that Biden was looking for more control. He actually said the word control many times. And I thought that was interesting. It's almost like it was like a subliminal thing that he said. He said it like 4 or 5 times, and every time he said it, I'm like, he's kind of telling you his perspective on things.
I was a little surprised about that too. I'm glad you brought that up because at first he talked about controlling the virus, and I thought that was interesting. Because earlier, the experts say it's not something you can control. So I kind of thought that was an interesting place to go. But then he talked about all the other things that he was going to control, and really the mandates that were going to be coming. And I think that had to be a scary undertaking. And some follow-up questions would have been great on some of that as well.
Well, most follow-up questions that were pertinent had to come from Trump himself, and I think that he actually handled that extremely well. His questions were done from the perspective of a concerned American citizen. Clearly, he's the sitting president, but the position he seemed to take, where he came from in the debate, which we'll talk about this at some point in one of our shows, are context creation methodology and how we go about creating the context for any situation. I don't know what Trump's exact methodology is. I do have a little bit of an idea because he actually does talk about it in this book, and How to Get Rich. He actually has 2 chapters about Carl Jung, and he talks about it. And I actually think he was using that trick in this debate. I might talk about that in a minute. But so the context creation, really being clear about where you're coming from. And I think the president was really clear about where he's coming from. He came from a place of like being a concerned American citizen, and he was asking questions of Joe Biden from that perspective. Like, don't you think you owe people an answer on this? And so on and so forth. It was a way that he asked the questions that was really interesting, as opposed to being the combatant Trump that he was in the previous debate and really needling him. It was more from the I'm just a concerned person wanting to do it, and I think he did that pretty well. I don't know what did you notice that, and how do you think he did with the questioning?
Yeah, I thought he did great with the questioning. I thought he did a really good job of getting out his points and turning some things that have been talking points for years on their head. I thought he did a really great job around that. And if you were undecided out there and listening with an open mind, I think it was it had to give you a pause. Like, okay, some of the things that we've been fed for years are just not true. But I really thought the contrast that he set out, which is, Joe Biden had 47 years to do this, to do whatever. And by the way, Joe Biden did take his only legislative accomplishment and say, "Yep, it was a mistake." So I thought even that. Okay, so that was the 47 years, and why do you think in 4 more years he's going to get it done? When the juxtaposition of look at what's happened in 47 months and what's happened. And there were talk of a lot of numbers in last night's debate. One number that wasn't brought up, and it's been bore out in a few different surveys now, is that 57% of Americans believe they're better off today than they were 4 years ago. So I think that's
a big deal. By the way, we might have Lee Vacher on for another Grassfire polling report, and to talk about the hidden Trump voters again. And I think that might be the kind of question that helps you get at where those people are. Because how can you be in a position of thinking that things are actually better off and then not actually have your vote follow that? Honestly, it is one of those lead indicator questions on a poll that when we do polling, we think, okay, there's certain questions. Direction of the country used to be one. I don't think it's so indicative anymore. But that is also, if you're better off today than you were before, is a kind of a leading indicator. And oftentimes, if you're tracking polling, the ballot question will just lag behind that a little bit. And I have a feeling that could be an indicator as to some of the hidden Trump vote.
I was watching an interview of voters in southeastern Pennsylvania yesterday, and one of the voters said something that I just thought was very profound. And he was like, "Look, when I have a little extra money in my pocket, other people have to have extra money in their pocket. Like, hey, if it's working for me, and the economy rarely works for me, then it's got to be working for others." And so I think there's something like that going on, where people are like, yeah, not only am I better off, I think we're better off overall. And so I thought it was an interesting comment to hear, and I do think, and we've talked about it, like, hey, sometimes these questions, you're like, is this the same place? Well, what we talked about yesterday on yesterday's show is that the world can look very different if you live in a red state or a blue state or a purple state. Unemployment's, nearly twice as high in blue states as it is in red states. Mm-hmm. So, and then the purple states.
And by the way, so I think that's on my Twitter feed. You can go look at that. The analysis, it was about 10.6% in blue states. That's states that have voted in the last 4 elections for president. They voted Democrat. And then the states that last 4 election cycles have voted for Republicans. It's at around 5% or so. Yeah. And that is, it's pretty remarkable. That's that difference. And then the purple states that have been back and forth, they're around 7%. Both of red states and purple states are below the national average, which is interesting. By the way, so Justin, you had a question about the direction of the country. That is a polling question. It's part of the survey instrument. So that has nothing to do with maybe how that sounds, but that is just a question that is asked on polls. It just doesn't seem to be a lead indicator as it used to be. What we would do is we would watch certain questions and we'd ask a ballot question. So the ballot question is, between these two people, who would you vote for? And then you'd ask questions like, what's your opinion of how the direction the country is going in? And then you have questions like, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago or 2 years ago, or things like that. And what I'm saying is, just in the last couple of years, actually probably since President Obama's reelection. So it's been a while now that does not have the same kind of leading indicator. Usually what would happen is if that ticked up or down, you'd see the ballot question would change in a few weeks after that. Yeah. So anyway, that's what that means.
And the only thing I'll say there is that I think there might be a disconnect for people, like the direction. Well, you can think things are going well for you, mm-hmm. and wherever you're getting maybe your news from, you might be scared about something that's 10 years away.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. So I think that's part of it. Like, hey, I think things are pretty good, but, there's scary things on the horizon.
Yeah. So speaking as a conservative Republican for myself, I think things are better off for myself than they were 4 years ago. And I watch the riots in these cities, and I see people trying to throw gasoline on racial issues, and I see Joe Biden pushing the big find people hoax, and I'm just like, how are we going to stop the country going off of a cliff? And for me, the answer is we have to reelect President Trump. For me, that's like the only way, because if we don't, then the media and social media and all these different powers pretty much will have unquestioned control of our lives, and that's scary to me. So I can both think the country's not going in the right direction, but then also think I'm better off because President Trump was elected, and his reelection is critical to keeping things going. So I want to go to the next filter, and then we have the final filter, which is ultimately, I think, post any event is the most important filter. But the new one I've added is the base engagement filter, because this is, elections really have become, it's partly why the direction of the country, I just explained it for myself, my own personal perspective, why I don't think it's the most, why the direction of the country may not have as much of an impact anymore, because we are in a very partisan world now. So base engagement is probably a better indicator now of how things are going to go. And if you look at both the first debate and last night's debate, so there'll be people who didn't like the first debate and thought, no one won. Some people might think Biden won. Some people thought Trump won, but it was ugly. Whatever. I'm probably in the last camp, that it was an unpleasant experience. But the base engagement filter, I would say in each and every one of the engagements we've seen so far, Trump has systematically divided Joe Biden from his base. And so my perspective on the, so the base engagement filter, Sean, why don't you take a look at that?
I thought it was muddled for Biden. And there were a few things. One is he talked about amnesty, that we haven't heard much of, and I actually said the word. I was a little surprised about that, so I thought that might be something that the base would like. I think a few times he tried to take it to Trump a little bit, so the base just loves that, regardless of the issue over there. But I think it was a mixed bag. He basically said, no, the Green New Deal, no, and then basically all the underlying things of the Green New Deal, he at some point said he was going to do during the debate. So given that so I just thought that was a little mixed on the Biden side. Mm-hmm. On the Trump side, I thought he pretty well gave the base what they'd be looking for. Where they're at now, and I do think for folks that are maybe on the periphery, that it was that they're a little more concerned about tone or whatever. I think he gave them what they needed to. So I thought he really delivered in any area that he necessarily needed to. Looking through that filter.
Yeah. So my perspective is similar. I think that. Well, one, Trump has developed such a great relationship with his base, and we see it in every single poll that we do. He's at historic numbers with Republicans. So he has a lot of leeway. So he can actually go out there, because he spent a lot of time talking about criminal justice reform and things like that. There are a few other people in the party who are there with him on that, like Rand Paul and folks like that. That's a certain libertarian part of the party. And they like it, but there's a lot of the social conservative folks and maybe anti-crime folks who they're concerned about it. I think he's actually elevated people's understanding of the issue, though. I think there's conservatives now who get just having these hardcore sentences doesn't necessarily improve the situation. It makes it harder for people to come back into society when they come out, and so many different things. I actually think it's more of a compassionate position. But anyway, he spent a lot of time talking about something that would not be a traditional Republican issue, and it's partly because he's developed such a great relationship with his base, and he spends so much time talking to them with the rallies and everything else, that if you're a Republican voter who watches even one of those, you are more educated on those positions, on those issues, than you've ever been before, because we've never had a leader who has that much communication with you. So I think President Trump always has an ability to talk about things further outside of the Republican typical orthodoxy than most people, because he's proven himself. I mean, he's been the most effective Republican president that we've had since Abe Lincoln, I would say. So with that, I think the president did the one thing that people were asking him for, is for those people that want to vote for him, what you just said, Sean, is really brilliant. It's he changed the tone, and it's really amazing that he was able to do that. And I think we'll talk about that when we talk about the experience in a second. So that's what I think he won on that. And then Biden, I think that he split himself from his base on several occasions, in particular on the oil and gas issue. I think that's going to be a real problem for him. And he continues to want to say that he beat those other people, the various liberals he was running against. And it feels a little bit like he's poking him in the eye with it. So he's definitely trying to say that he's his own man, and I don't think that really helps with his base. So that's my perspective on the base engagement filter.
And even on that point, Dustin, I just want to say, so he says he's his own man, but when it comes to making a decision on things like the Supreme Court, which didn't come up much last night, he's going to impanel the essence of government, a blue panel commission to take 6 months to decide what needs to happen on court packing. You know, it used to just be a bonehead idea, according to the junior senator from Delaware. But now it's worthy of a blue panel commission to think about it. So
yeah, and if people want to, you can go to any of our social media, and you can actually look up. We have a graph that you can take a look at. That is or infographic that has what the reinforcing power loop is, what we call it, and what court packing would do. And it's worthwhile. Take a look at it. You can share it. I think it's really powerful and persuasive, because the way I see it is we have 3 separate and co-equal branches of government, and they are supposed to work in kind of opposition of each other to balance each other out. That's the whole purpose of it. But what court packing would do is it would actually complete a power circuit between those 3 branches. So instead of being co-equal and separate branches that balance each other out, they would then become, it would close a loop and become this ever accelerating power loop that would just, keep going around in circles. They would all just add to each other's powers. So the bureaucracy would get larger, and the courts would back that up. It would increase executive power. The legislature would get rid of the filibuster, and then they would add, 2 new states and add more senators, and they could then change election laws, and then those would get backed up by the courts. And just they would start to, instead of balance each other out, they would reinforce each other, which I think would be devastating. So we have a GIF, a moving graphic that's on our on Facebook and on Twitter. You can go to either one of those and you can share it with people, because I think it really elucidates or illuminates that. And let's go into the experience filter, because that's ultimately, when it's all said and done, people don't really remember the specifics of any kind of an event, any kind of communication. And what I would say, so we'll talk about this on another episode a little bit more in detail, but my theory of communication is attention, intention, and retention. So communication never happens unless you have someone's attention. Like, you have to get someone's attention, otherwise you don't have any kind of communication happening. It's one of the reasons why Trump is pretty good at communications. He gets people's attention. And then intention is how you want people to, what you want them to get from your communication, your intention for what they get from your communication. And then the last one is retention. People have to remember it. It has to stick with them. And oftentimes the one thing that no matter what is going to stick with people is the experience that they had, that feeling, that just general takeaway. We sometimes talk about it like, what was the last great customer service experience that you had? I imagine everybody could say, like, oh, I was at this restaurant, they went above and beyond. I felt like they appreciated my business, whatever it was. You had this experience, and that's what you're left with. You don't remember all the details, but you remember kind of the experience you're left with. So the experience filter is oftentimes all that people are left with. I mean, most of us probably just remember the experience from the first debate. We don't remember the exact things that were said, but we just remember the experience that we had. So the experience filter, I want to just say, so I think President Trump, he really does listen to what is being said on social media and in the news. And he has this chapter in How to Get Rich, of all things. It's called Read Carl Jung. And he has a lot in here, but he talks about Carl Jung, and he says he came away from having read Carl Jung that everybody else is the gun. I, however, am the trigger. That's what he says.
No truer words have ever been written.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is his quote exactly. They are the gun. I, however, am the trigger. So I speak and tread carefully. It's an effective visual aid to avoid conflicts. Anyway, he goes into that, but he is really clear that he actually, what that is, and we talk about this as being a clearing, like a clearing in a forest. There's no trees, so it's a place for sunlight to show up. You don't have to do anything. It's just like in the part of what we talk about with creating context, and how we do that with a can. We can do it in less than 5 minutes, and it really sets up the context for the situation. He does that for himself. So he realized he was going to have a different way of being in this debate. And both times he has led the interactions between everybody. So when he was combative, the moderator and Joe Biden were combative. So he was the trigger in that case. And then last night he chose to be calmer and to be questioning, but to be calmer and acknowledging even, and that's what came out of it. So it's interesting. I would think a lot of people are left with the first debate isn't how he always is. He can modulate and he can change. And I don't think people will consciously think of it, but I think people got that he's the leader no matter what. In either of those cases, he kind of sets the table. He sets the pace, and no matter what, people are going to left with who was the leader in that situation, and it was Donald Trump. And I think that's ultimately why will be viewed ultimately, even by people who say that, on CNN said that Biden won. When you watch Jake Tapper, it looks like his dog just got kicked, and he's saying Biden won. That's not what he actually feels.
Right.
What he feels is that Biden came across as an angry guy who's kind of running out of gas. And that's what people are left with. I think I was left with, I was a little bit concerned for Joe Biden, because I don't hate Joe Biden. I don't like his positions. It's really sad to see what's happening with him. There's so many things about him. I don't hate the guy. I don't like that he's pushed really big lies that I think are damaging for the country, like the Fine People hoax. But anyway, that's my impression, is that people are going to be left with, I don't think that guy's got what it takes. And the other guy clearly is the leader, and whether they can say it that way or not, I don't know.
I agree. I think the experience people are left with, and it was interesting because it was looking at this versus where the public polls try to tell us this race is at, right? Mm-hmm. Because if it's Biden is way out in front and all he's got to do is get to the finish, well then why, when it came to the base, it seemed like he was all over the map. Mm-hmm. 1 minute he's his own man, the next minute he's taking on the idea of oil, just getting rid of it altogether. I mean, it was amnesty, that isn't what undecided voters are looking for. But then it seemed like then he was trying to get undecided voters. So it was a little confusing there, where I think it was very clear who Donald Trump was talking to. I think he was. Yeah. I think he was really talking to. It seemed like any American who was still open to making a decision in this race, and giving them some concrete reasons to do it. So that was a little puzzling to me. Because
that's part of the difference between the two, and it's partly the over prepping. I assume that's what's necessary for Joe Biden. Is probably the right choice for his campaign, to do all that prepping and to have the talking points ready to go. What it comes away with is a little bit of lack of authenticity. It also doesn't allow you to really think on your feet, and it also doesn't take into account often the audience, where part of our context creation for communication, a big part of it is really getting who the audience is for you. And I think that was really clear that the president knew who his audience was, and he could always speak to his audience and what they were wanting to do. And his words aren't going to be perfect.
Yeah.
And he gets that. It's going to be about the experience that they're left with. So he's going to speak to his audience, and he's going to speak to them in a way that he knows is what they want. And I think he delivered that last night, especially changing his tone in particular for some of those folks who are supporters of him, want him to be their guy, and they didn't like the first debate. And I think he modulated to speak to that. Whereas Joe was not in control of his way of being. He got angry, and when he was introduced with curveballs, it started getting him confused. And there's some of his answers that are just unintelligible. I had no idea what he was talking about. Yeah. He was just kind of streaming together various talking points that he'd had and he's practiced, and it just didn't make sense. And it was actually kind of troubling to me. I thought, I cannot imagine this guy. If I was a Democrat, I think I'd have a hard time with this. I can't imagine that guy even dealing with like the Prime Minister of Great Britain, let alone, one of our big adversaries. Yeah, like I feel like you would get taken to the cleaners every single time.
Yeah, it was troubling, and part of it though, going back to what I was talking about, it also reminded me of Hillary Clinton. Like it was. I want to have a message to these folks, and I want to have a message to these folks, and I want to talk to this group. And it's how you end up the final weekend of the campaign going to Grand Rapids trying to get Republicans, and then the next flight is to Philadelphia trying to turn out the urban vote. So it was really, I kind of saw that happening on stage for an hour and a half, and it was really kind of baffling to me.
And that's a really good point. I like that you brought that up, because that is actually one of the real world consequences of what we talked about a couple weeks ago on our episode where we talked about how to improve politics, at least your experience of it immediately. And part of that is separating your identity from your politics, that you have politics, you have points of view, you have opinions. I mean, we clearly have lots of opinions, and but we also are clear that that's not who we are. I am not as my identity a Republican. I'm not as an identity my beliefs. These are things I have. I can change them. I can give them up. I can hold on to them dearly, whatever it is. But they're things I have. They're not who I am. And what happens when you have a point of view or you have a worldview that your identity is your politics, and you create this whole system and this environment of identity politics, you end up in a situation where you do what you just described. That is a natural strategy that comes out of that worldview, is that you then talk outside both sides of your mouth to different groups constantly, because if you were to have a different opinion from them, then they would dislike your identity. Yeah. And so you end up talking to completely different people. And it's, I just can't imagine, honestly. Yeah. That. And clearly every politician talks out both sides of their mouth. Yeah. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about to the uber level that we see in the Democrat Party right now.
Well, and it also reminds me of John Kerry in 2004. He's at a campaign stop in Michigan, and he goes, for me, I go for Buckeye football. And the crowd starts booing because he's in the wrong state. And he goes, well, wait, that was in Ohio. Now I love the Wolverines. And people are like, oh, my God, he is a flip-flopper.
Yeah, like when he was in Wisconsin, he said how much he likes Lambert Field.
Yeah.
And, they didn't care for that too much.
Yeah. So, but I think the and it is a difference about Trump. He doesn't go and say, okay, let's talk about, whatever the local team is or anything. Mm-hmm. Which is
sometimes he'll point out that he likes something different than the local people, and then he usually gets the biggest cheers out of that because it's so clearly authentic.
Yeah.
It's also what he does. He wears a suit everywhere.
Yeah.
Occasionally, if he takes his tie off, he makes a big deal about it. He makes it performance art, and that's that's perfect because he's being authentic. He knows that it's authentic, but it's also a creation.
Yeah.
He's intending to be a president who is his kind of president.
Yeah.
And he has a specific idea of what he's presenting, and he's really clear, and he stays consistent with that over and over again. And you can see that he can still modulate within that whole persona, but he modulates. It is a fascinating thing to watch, and someday when he's no longer president, maybe in 40 years, we will all miss it. Clearly, I'm joking about that for anybody who is listening to the podcast and didn't see my face. Okay, so well, that's really, I think that's the thing. Trump won the debate. Clearly, I think he won the first debate because it brought us to the point that we're at now. I think we have laid the media bare in all of this.
And Kathy points out that the President Trump is a real person. And I think that's what's bore through, and I also think it's why some really hate him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not the way this is supposed to work. Like,
you do hear media and you hear Democrats, you hear other people, some pundits. They sometimes say that he needs to be less real. And they don't say exactly like that, but when they're telling him he needs to not do certain things in public and needs to do this or not, they're basically talking about a time when we had politicians who were much more fake.
Yeah.
And our point of view is, and I'd say the first part of our career, we were more likely to help people be super careful in politics. And the truth is that leads to inauthenticity. When you're super careful, you don't tell people what your actual thoughts are. You don't need to vomit all over people every thought that you have. But I think that President Trump has made it so real people can actually run for office. I think we're seeing a lot more real people. I think people are a little bit less worried about, all the crazy stuff that they're going to say about you, because they're going to say about it anyway. So I think there's more real people who are willing to step up and get involved and run for office. I think that's actually happening, at least on the right. I also think on the left, though, there's people who are willing to do that too. I don't like AOC. However, I think she's definitely been taking notes from the president. And anybody who thinks she's just plain stupid, they're wrong. She's extremely effective. She's so effective that as a freshman member, she's still a freshman member of the House. She is leading Nancy Pelosi around by her nose. And that is remarkable to think of. But with that, I would like to talk about our sponsors, and then thank you for everybody we've had a lot of responses on this episode, and I will actually be putting together, since we had the technical difficulties, I'll be putting together a clean edited version of this. But thank you for all the interactions that we've had, and if you'd like to vote in the poll, it's open for another 12 hours, and you can go let us know what your thoughts on who won the debate, and you can go to @Dustin Olson, and that's OLSON. And then if you want to send Sean a message, you can go to @Sean SEAN_Bartley BARTLEY, and you can let him know what your thoughts are on Twitter. And then check out 10centtexting.com. Download the book, 8 Pro Tips for Political Texting. And then you can launch your campaign today. People are voting, early voting starting in at least 1 or 2 states right now. And it's just constantly, it's a good time to get in front of voters, let them know how to go vote, let them know if they haven't voted yet to go vote. Texting is one of the best ways you can do that. And you can have actual conversations back and forth with people once you get a hold of them. And if you want to get people at their door, you want to do canvassing, you want to get people in front of the grocery store to have them sign your petition, or you want to get people on the phone and make sure they go vote here in the final days of the election, you can go to Grassfire LLC. That's at grassfire.us, and you will get the best company out there for that. And with that, thank you for watching, everybody. Thank you for listening on the podcasting platforms. Please leave a review, rating, and subscribe or follow us. And post any more comments that you have for today. Sean, any last parting thoughts that you'd like to leave people with?
Well, really enjoyed all the interactions, so appreciate everybody being involved. That's great. Thanks for listening. Leave us a rating on Apple Podcast, and if you like our style, you're thinking about running for office, reach out to us at olsonstrategies.com. That's OLSON strategies.com. I think you can tell that we have a different way of looking at this, and what we're really committed to is empowering you as political leaders to be able to make a difference in your community, your state, and your country. So that's what we're committed to, and really letting you share your vision with those around you, and giving you all the tools you need to do it.
Yeah, because what we are ultimately committed to, doing political trade secrets, which you can go to politicaltradesecrets.com to find old episodes and everything else. But what we're committed to here is we are committed to exploring what it is to be a political leader in this country, and to empowering political leaders. And that's everybody, from anybody who's a citizen can be a political leader. You don't have to be elected. You don't have to run for office. You can be a political leader. Just by asking the questions and engaging today, you're being a political leader. By talking to people in your family and your community, you're being a political leader. So we are all about that. And in particular, we're about that with the purpose of reigniting American patriotism. We believe that is the framework, having that patriotism, really coming back to our founding principles that will have this country be successful forever. That is what will have us moving in the right direction. And, that's what we're about here. So if you're about that, keep watching and keep joining us. And thank you for being here today. This has been another episode of Political Trade Secrets.
Join us next time by subscribing on iTunes, and get show notes and sign up for our newsletter at politicaltradesecrets.com.